Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it's time to have a look at another crafting event devblog, and for this time it's time to have a look at the JDS Yūgure, the DD-184. This is a rank 2 Japanese destroyer which is coming to the game. It's going to be a premium, so you will get access to premium bonuses, and also it will be in the Japanese tree, which is pretty nice. Remember that there is a crafting event coming for War Thunder in the coming weeks. They talked about in the first devblog for the SU-76D that it will be in April, so we're going to have to see when it is in April to be able to take part. Unfortunately, we still don't have the full information about the crafting event, but I'm sure that will come later in the week, and I'll make sure to cover it for you guys. Anyway, let's get into the history of this machine. So before service in the JMSDF, the Yūgure was known as the USS Richard P. Leary, the DD-664, and this was one of many Fletcher-class destroyers which was built by the United States Navy during World War II. It was commissioned in 1944, and it took part in some of the last operations in the Pacific Theater before being decommissioned and put into reserve in 1946. And just like a lot of other machines in the late 50s, in 1959, the USS Richard P. Leary, as well as another Fletcher destroyer, were loaned to the JMSDF and renamed to the Yūgure. In Japanese service, the destroyer was modified several times, basically to fit their criteria. It was more designed around anti-submarine warfare and also training ship roles, and the Yūgure would end up serving with the Japanese Navy until 1974. Then it was returned to the US and then ultimately sold for scrap in 1976. So it served in about a year of the Second World War, nearly 20 years with the Japanese, and then after that it was sold for scrap. Not very interesting story overall, just on the light of it, but if you actually look into its World War II service, it did take part in some quite interesting battles. So with the announcement of the Yūgure being the third crafting event vehicle, now what we have to do is wait for the fourth. And since the leak list from before seems to be correct so far, looks like that fourth may be the M8 AGS. This puts the JDS Yūgure in a bit of an interesting situation. I wouldn't say it's the weakest of the four. I think the weakest of these four crafting vehicles definitely goes to the SU-76D. As a person who has spaded the SU-57B, I understand how bad that platform is. And generally, a Fletcher-class destroyer is always going to have use just because of its guns and how fast it is able to fire and its overall mobility as well, plus some other things that the Yūgure has. So, looking at it, the relevant power of it compared to some of the other machines, such as the F4F Phantom, and we are taking liberties and saying the M8 AGS, my vote is that this is going to be the third pick for a lot of people. Now, this means that if they do the crafting event properly this time, and at least from my point of view, where you're able to grind out everything, I definitely think it will be worth actually getting this. A rank 2 premium is pretty useful, especially for the Japanese tree, to be able to get into some of those more meaty destroyers with those beautiful long lance torpedoes, which are so useful in rank 3 and also in arcade. But the one problem with this thing being a rank 2 is the fact that it won't be able to take part in stuff such as battle pass things, events, and also dailies when it comes to special tasks and stuff like that. Rank 2s have a distinct disadvantage nowadays compared to rank 3s, not just from the research point of view, but also from the fact that you just can't use them in a lot of events that War Thunder is doing, and the fact that these events events keep ramping up over and over and over again, it means that, you will have less use for this machine. It will still be useful for stuff such as authentic decals, if they ever come around, that's definitely something that may happen. And hopefully, when it comes to the event overall, when it comes to this crafting event, you will be able to get all of these vehicles, because I am actually kind of interested in this machine as somebody who has enjoyed the Japanese Blue Water Tech Tree quite a lot with their destroyers, and even sometime with their light cruisers. I would love to have another machine to be able to run alongside some of the destroyers that I have. The problem is, as I said though, with these crafting events, is the crafting events normally mean you can only get 2 vehicles out of the 4, and this wouldn't be one of my picks. If you can only get 1 minor vehicle and 1 major vehicle, then yes, I would definitely take this over the SU-76D, but we're going to have to see if that is the case when the crafting event actually gets announced. So what is the difference between this and the standard Fletcher class that we have in the American tech tree? Well, the difference is that the Yūgure loses one of the 5-inch guns. So it only has 4 5-inch main guns, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, which are single mounted. Now, this is quite a bit of a firepower loss, but at the same time, these guns are incredibly fast firing compared to a lot of others in the game. And if you do sequential fire, you're able to continuously bombard enemies with the guns. And since it's losing a gun, just like the German destroyer that we just had in the Battle Pass, the Z25, Gaijin will probably put it at a lower BR than the Fletcher class that we have in the American tree, because of that. So my opinion is that this thing will probably be around 4.0, and 4 5-inch guns which are rapid firing is completely fine for that. Another thing that it does lose, which I think is actually more of an issue for me personally, and if any of you play Naval Arcade, this will hit you quite hard, it loses its torpedo tubes, which are a key strategic thing to use, especially in Naval Arcade, to be able to block off areas of the map, so therefore you can force enemies into other areas, and then you can gun them down with your main guns. But since it's lost them, you are now solely relying on those gun armaments to be able to survive, which is fine. It's at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal. The guns will still be fine, but it's always nice to have more strings to your bow to be able to deal with enemies, and it looks like this machine has lost one. It does have a little bit of a bonus though over a few other machines. So even though it loses a main gun, even though it loses its torpedo tubes, it gains a bunch of AA. It gets 5 dual 40mm, which will be able to deal with pretty much everything from PT boats to aircraft, mainly aircraft at this tier, because most destroyers at this BR do not have any armor, therefore they're very susceptible to being bombed, they're very susceptible to being torpedoed by planes, so having 40mm to be able to defend you, as long as your crew skills are high enough so they're accurate enough from an AI point of view, then you will be completely fine. You will be in the money. So you trade main firepower for AA firepower, and it really depends on where you sit with that. The 40mm also are placed on either side of the central area of the Yūgure, and also one is placed on the back of the Yūgure. So that pretty much means that if something is coming at a perpendicular to you, then you will only be able to get 6 40mm on the target. Now this is plenty enough, especially if you are controlling it yourself, but if the machine is going quite fast, let's say, maybe the AI may struggle at dealing with it. If something is coming straight above you though, you can get all guns on target straight away, all 10 40mm, which should be very deadly. overall, when we look at this machine, it's looking really nice, and I really hope that with this crafting event, you are able to get everything, because if you're not, I feel like a lot of people are going to miss out on this machine in favor of what they're going to see as nicer prizes, when this one just looks really nice. I wish it was rank 3, that's one of the only issues, just because of events in the future, and just because of specials, but also consider this, you know, it's definitely something to look for instead of those higher BR, higher ranking event vehicles that are either known about, like the F4F or the M8 AGS. We'll have to see when it comes to when the crafting event is announced, but right now I'm a little bit negative about the situation. We'll have to see in a few days. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hosest Kishot, Hans, Bareen, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.